Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today for something that's more pop culture as opposed to the regular news stuff I've been reporting on. So this article is from Bleeding Fool, dated July 3rd, and it's called CBR's Reckoning Comic Book Resources, which is CBR, shakes up its ideological staff. And I bring this up because for people that are not in the know, first of all, I am a huge comic book fan, have been reading comics pretty much since the mid to late 90s regularly. And so CBR was one of the places that you definitely went to whenever you needed some comic book news or something like that, especially I'd say all the way up until like maybe the 2010s or something to that effect. But it was definitely a reliable place. And then in the last few years, kind of like a lot of places, it just went completely ideological, which this article will explain what happened about that. And ever since then, like, they're known for hit pieces and, trying to defame people. So I bring this article up to say, like, they deserve what's coming to them wholeheartedly. So the article goes on, or I shouldn't say goes on, it starts with Comic Book Resources, also known as CBR, was founded by Jonah Weiland in 1995 and became a collection of blogs dedicated to academic and detailed comic book related discussions. Everything was great until 2016. That was okay, so that's when it was, when Valnet Inc., a Canadian-based company which also owns Screen Rant, and that's part of the problem because Screen Rant is kind of shit as well, has bought the site and relaunched it as CBR.com, integrating the blogs into the site. It didn't take long for the new owners to learn that they could get even more views with clickbait than actual news. For example, 10 reasons Captain Marvel is the best Avenger and 10 others why it's Mrs. Marvel. So it says, within a year, CBR brought on writer and activist Kieran Schiak, who soon began publicly attacking creators online, such as DC Comics artist Ethan Van Sciver, who I highly recommend everybody go and listen to on his channel. It's called Comic Artist Pro Secrets, and he's on Twitter at Ethan Van Sciver. He's one of my absolute favorite people to follow on here. He's awesome, and no, he's not any of the things that we're about to go over. So this writer accused him of being a Nazi based on art associated with the villain Van Sciver had drawn, and that villain was Sinestro. And Sinestro, for people that don't know, is a Green Lantern villain, and he's essentially Space Hitler. So Ethan drew pictures of Space Hitler referencing real Hitler. Okay, remember, Sinestro is a villain. Okay? Just keep that in mind. So here's kind of what that is. As Schiak wasn't joking, he meant it and began demanding that DC Comics fire the longtime artist. And here's embedded tweets saying, yep, DC Comics still employs him. So he's putting pressure on them. And by the way, Ethan did do videos on this dude on his channel. I would definitely go check him out. This dude is like the most loseriest of losers possible. He's one of those guys that's always like soliciting for like basic needs because he doesn't make any money because he's a piece of garbage. And this is what he does. He just tries to get people fired. He's just a piece of human refuse. And then this guy, Tim Doyle here, is also another piece of shit. I haven't heard anything from him in a while, and I've been hanging around the Comicsgate area since probably 2017. And this guy was Tim Doyle, that is, was one of the absolute biggest agitators. And he has none of the things, or Ethan is none of the things that you see here. Tim Doyle is just a leftist that someone is a Republican and he has to complain about him. That's all. So I'm just going to scroll through this really slowly. So I'm not going to read all of the stuff that Kieran Schiak wrote here, but of course it's all just every time Ethan's name comes up, there's this certain German World War II people and his affiliation, he doesn't have any. So all of this is just defamation. And that dude, as much as he doesn't have anything, if Ethan had the means at the time, and he should have sued this guy into effing oblivion over defamatory stuff because none of what that dude said is true. So it says, in response, Van Sciver denounced the claims, calling them evil, adding that these people who spread these images and claim that I am a Nazi are liars. They are lying flat out. They are liars who wish this industry wasn't tolerant of people who do not share their partisan political views. Well said. That's right. This is Bounding Into Comics, which is an excellent site. Everybody should go follow. It was reported that the origins of the libel, which is what it was, were that Ethan Van Sciver had been attached to a sketchbook called Uber Alice. Colorist Moose Bauman eventually admitted that the book was his idea, not Van Sciver's, which would have put any further defamatory scuttlebutt to rest, and maybe even resulted in Schiak being fired from CBR and Polygon. Oh, so he writes for two absolute garbage websites. But it didn't, and he was reprimanded in any way, and he wasn't reprimanded in any way, at least not immediately. Shiak would continue to write for both websites until the end of 2018. Yeah, and like I said, I haven't heard anything about this guy either, like the Tim Doyle dude, in a long time. So good. He should be out of the industry because he's just a liar. So for his part, Shiak eventually fessed up to being an idiot after his own failed crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter, but the admission was not related to a smearing of other indie creators. So again, embedded tweets here. I'm going to scroll down this pretty slow so you can see them for yourself here. And of course, this person down here says, I thought you were going to apologize for, calling people that were just plain old Republicans, Nazis, but of course it didn't happen. So it says, and Shiak wasn't the only ideologue and serial harasser at CBR. That same year, the website smeared Alterna Comics publisher Peter Simeti, who's also a good guy, over his decision to institute a social media policy that insisted their creators resist the urge to attack and insult fans. That seems like common sense to me. Like, why would you want to insult the people who are responsible for you for your living? Why would you do that? Because the article was written in a way to make Simeti look like the bad guy, and Simeti demanded that they remove the article, and they eventually responded by softening the headline, and there's a link to that right here. And here is Peter Simeti basically saying, yep, basically this guy wrote a bunch of bullshit, and he's going to seek legal action. He says he doesn't want to, but he's going to unless they change something. And again, Pete Simeti is a chill dude too, so to get him to be like that is like, he was probably fuming. Says, and when they weren't attacking comic book companies or comic creators, CBR would attack the fandom themselves. For instance, here's an article explaining how Marvel's golden boy, Steve Rogers, only decided to become Captain America for selfish desires. This is bait. So kind of feel like I just heard Tom Hardy in my head from the Mad Max Fury Road saying, this is bait, or that's bait, or whatever he said. Yeah, it says Steve Rogers wasn't a hero for becoming Captain America. He was selfish. Nope, not at all. He was, like, the Captain America movie, essentially, it had got it right with Steve Rogers in that scene in the first one where I think it was Tommy Lee Jones's character throws a grenade. It's a dud grenade. And all of the guys in his unit disperse, but Steve Rogers jumps on the grenade saying, like, get back, get, and he's like this skinny waif of a kid. And they were like, yeah, that's the guy I want for the experiment, is the dude who just put his ass on the line for everybody else. So that's not a selfish thing. I don't think jumping on a grenade and facing almost certain death, to save everybody else around you is a selfish thing. So F off with that stupidity. After an enormous amount of pushback, CBR decided to delete that outrageous article. Good, but fans' memories are long and the internet is forever, as we all know. Then CBR was still a long way from being done trashing legacy comic book characters. Just 2 weeks later, they insisted that Marvel should stop selling Punisher merchandise in order to stop police and military from wearing and displaying the Punisher logo. Regrettably, since the same toxic culture exists at Marvel, that's unfortunately true, as the legacy publisher eventually got around to doing precisely what the CBR headline demanded. Because, again, they're ideologues at Marvel, and they made a stupid decision with an extremely popular character. So it seems like CBR's business model has been attacking popular culture for a while, and while the damage was starting to take a toll, they were far from done. Just last summer, a pair of writers named Anthony Gramuglia and David Harth were publicly attacking indie comics creator Eric D. July, so it's Eric July, I'm just going to call him that, I don't worry about his middle initial, and his ISOM #1 graphic novel, taking issue with the price point of his enormously successful crowdfunded campaign. And scanning quickly through here, doesn't say how much it was. By the way, on this, it cost $35 for a 96-page book, which, if you're gonna, that is a lot, but it's basically a graphic novel, not like a single issue of a comic. $35 for 96 pages is definitely overpriced, but if people are willing to pay for it, as I was, he's allowed to sell it for that because people bought it. And he ended up raising somewhere north of, I think it was $3.5 million. And I believe to this day it is the single biggest comic book he did it on his own website, but still single biggest crowdfunding campaign in comic book history was Eric July. And the aforementioned Ethan Van Sciver is actually #2 with his Cyberfrog comic, and I'm patiently awaiting issue #2 to arrive. The first one was very good. His art is beyond phenomenal. There's not even words to describe it. It's exquisite. Let's call it that. So let's get back to the article before I go down a rabbit hole that I can't recover from. It says this sort of harassment isn't out of character for Gramuglia. When he's not writing for CBR, Anime Feminist, or Screen Rant, he's attacking Bleeding Fool and bounding into comics over at the Mary Sue. So this guy writes for a bunch of shill sites that are far leftist stupidity sites. It says, all right. And their fight with Eric July, however, They finally exposed themselves and the basis of CBR's attacks. Politics, pure and simple. CBR was actively ignoring some of the biggest stories in independent comics simply because they didn't like the politics of the creators, despite the fact that those same creators were breaking sales records with their crowdfunding campaigns. And that's what I just mentioned right now. And there's a link here. So yeah, as you see, it pops up down at the bottom of the Cyberfrog 2 campaign. But let's keep going here. It says, in fact, Ethan Van Sciver was putting up numbers for his Cyberfrog that were comparable to some of Marvel Comics' top sellers, but CBR consistently ignored this news. Yeah, Ethan with his stuff, and Eric July with now he's funding for ISOM #2, so the next graphic novel, which is even bigger in terms of story-wise. I think it was 112 pages, but yeah, these people just ignore the enormous success of these two creators because they just don't fit their political leanings. That's it. It says Eric July's Rippaverse, that's what it's called, because Eric July goes by Young Rippa on YouTube, so it's the Rippaverse. It was likewise raising millions in crowdfunding. It was also ignored by CBR, so they were comfortable trashing these guys on social media, but refused to report on their indie comics on their comic book resource website. That's censorship. That's correct. That is exactly what censorship is. While we admit we're biased at Bleeding Full, which is right, which is correct, they do lean to the right, and again, nothing wrong with it. It says we don't ignore newsworthy comics news no matter who it involves, which is how it should be. Okay? So, this person who is supports the Rippaverse, this is David Harth, who is one of those previous far leftists here. So what does he say? That decision. Oh, here. So this person says, also, I just realized you have pronouns in your bio and you write for CBR. No wonder why you're against the Rippaverse. How come you guys don't have this story on your front page? Okay, that's a fantastic question. And David Harth, far leftist, says that decision is way above my pay grade, which I doubt, but possibly because he's one of many who only exist to be against the things we write about. It's not true. That would be like asking why Bernie Sanders doesn't have a column in a right-wing publication, which is false because Bernie Sanders has had articles in Fox News before, so try again, sir. So as John Delarose explains, and John Delarose is a right-wing commentator on stuff. He's a writer, a professional comic book writer as well, at least in like the independent circles, and I think he's written novels too. And again, go follow him on Twitter and on YouTube. So John Delarose explains, this was the moment when they admit that CBR is a left-wing political blog, not a comic book news website, correct, and that it is a rare moment where the mainstream entertainment media admits its political biases. Delarose goes on to demonstrate that CBR, or at least its writers, had been crafting a coordinated narrative against independent creators who hold political beliefs that are different to their own. This is bias, and this is bigotry. This is correct. As earlier this year, editor-in-chief and former Newsrama editor Chris Arant, who I've heard not very good things about as well in terms of his political leanings, was blowing the clarion call after Newsrama's co-founder Michael Doran stepped down after decades at the company, and the fear was palpable. And here's some Chris Arant things here. I'm just going to scroll slowly so you can read them. And of course, you can always get the article in the link below. But we'll keep going. It says, full disclosure, my own interactions as the author of the article with Arant may be best described as hostile. He hoped to do a hit piece on conservative creator Mike Barron until Michael Doran stepped in to respectfully make things right. By the way, Mike Barron is basically the guy responsible for making the Punisher a household name. He didn't create the Punisher, but when the Punisher had a solo series that started, I want to say in, was it 87? 86 or 87? Mike Barron was the guy that was writing the series, and I don't recall how many issues he wrote, but again, he's the guy that should be primarily responsible for making the Punisher kind of a household name. So just so you know who Mike Barron is. It says, fast forward to this summer, and now a reckoning seems to be taking place at CBR. Beginning in May of this year, the company began to undergo a major staffing upheaval, first reported by Pop vs. Graham McMillan, and according to McMillan, also no friend of the same indie publishers and creators, that's correct, I've seen his name bounced around too, so CBR's now former editor-in-chief Adam Swiderski announced via LinkedIn that my time at CBR has come to a close as I was laid off by Valnet this morning, and here's his thing, so we'll just go past that. Says it's worth mentioning that Swiderski's departure took place less than a year after joining the company last July. Afterwards, in an internal Slack message obtained by McMillan, CBR explained that they were undergoing major structural changes related to both culture and performance. It says CBR will be undergoing major structural changes related to turning the corner on both culture and performance. There's a direct quote. It says, as a result, certain roles no longer exist, and we are focusing on individuals who can create a more positive culture going forward, which is probably none of the people that have been mentioned already in this article. Edelman further informed remaining employees that the CBR would now be under the direction of the site's current managing editor, John Arvidin. Says, we have the utmost confidence in him and his abilities, said a Valnet Inc. representative, and we will be setting up calls to discuss the restructuring and the future with editors throughout the day and the week. Says, but the firings weren't done. Even more high-level editors at CBR were let go over the Memorial Day holiday. Oh no, too bad. Says, 2 more senior executives at the site have been laid off by owners Valnet Inc. as part of what's being described as a major structural changes intended to change the culture of the site as a whole. In addition to letting Adam Swiderski go from the position of editor-in-chief, Popverse has learned that Valnet has also laid off senior new editor Stephen Girding and senior features editor Christopher Baggett. Girding had been with CBR for 18 years, beginning as a freelancer in 2005, before working his way up to his current position. Baggett, by comparison, had been with the site since 2017. It says, within the next 4 weeks, CBR would not only let go over 3/4 of their editorial staff, but lose their HR team and a substantial amount of like-minded staffers who voluntarily left in solidarity. Well, again, get rid of the chaff. This, while ideologues in the industry and access media like Macmillan were clutching their pearls, the biggest question on their minds and ours was the line from that internal memo that CBR was undergoing major structural changes related to turning the corner on both culture and performance, which mentioned that there would be more focus on individuals who can create a more positive culture going forward. And here's another guy that says he's out as CBR's comics editor. Okay. Says Macmillan was beside himself, and he says, this raised eyebrows both outside the CBR community as well as inside. For those outside, the immediate question that followed the message was, what were the cultural problems at the site? Oh, gee, you don't actually know? Have you not read this article here? But anyway, according to multiple current and former insiders, the answer appears to be nothing that was made any better with the removal of the 3 laid-off editors. In terms of the cultural impact of the 3, current and former writers were extremely complimentary almost entirely across the board. The 3 had separately and collectively tried to protect and champion the writers on the site, according to multiple testimonies. The few complaints shared were purely on an individual basis. Specific concerns weren't responded to quickly enough or dismissed instead of cultural or endemic. And it comes back to the author of this article. It says, you see, even though I've shown you repeatedly throughout this post some of the cultural problems that were emblematic at CBR, guys like Graham Macmillan cannot see it because he shares their same bigoted ideology. That is correct. And I was just thinking that about myself about another thing going on, not in comic book culture, but just in the culture as a whole, which is, when you're a part of a cult that all thinks the same way, you can't see it because you're in it. So there you go. And here's a biography of Graham Macmillan. So Whisper Network outlet The Beat, and let's see here. Yeah, click on this Whisper Network thing. Don't have enough time to go into exactly what that is, but it's not good. So click on that and read that. But it says Whisper Network outlet The Beat reported that Swiderski, Girding, and Baggett were all removed for standing up for writers and pushing back against changes Valnet instituted, reporting that writers are being asked to do more work while shrinking the pay-per-view rates. This makes them sound heroic, but the simple fact of the matter is that many of CBR's journalists are also churning out clickbait for $5 an article. It makes them money, and because it makes them money, most readers have to come to treat them like the shills they are or just ignore them. Or most readers have come to treat them like the shills they are or just ignore them. This will slow down traffic, then slow down revenue, and eventually the site dies. The reporters have regularly supported whatever the current thing is. God, that is very well said, and will never criticize the studios or mainstream publishers unless they fall out of line with their ideology. It's boring and cringy after a while. No one wants to read that anymore. And unlike Graham, Eric July has been enjoying the news. Yeah, so it's an embedded video from Eric July. Go watch it. And we're done here. Last sentence. I know it's a long video, but here we go. It says whether or not CBR plans to replace the staffers they've cut loose is still unclear, but their About page lists only 4 staff members, with many positions being filled by one person. And the guy who wrote it, just to mention, is Chris Brawley. He is the head honcho of Bleeding Fool. So for anybody that's listening to this, that comes across this, that happens to be Comicsgate or Fandom Menace, but more specifically Comicsgate, because this is a comic book based thing. What do you think about this? Do you have any love lost for what's happening here? Is this a situation of get woke, go broke? I personally think it is. I don't have a problem with them going out of business. You made stupid decisions. You hired Idealogues to be your writers, and you're paying the price. I don't feel bad about it. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.